Go fast, turn left. Simple to say, insanely difficult to do at 140 miles an hour on a dirt track. But that's flat track racing, and Wendy Schneider has spent the better part of 2 decades telling a special story in the flat track world. Wendy's film, Angels of Dirt, shares the story of Charlotte Kainz, a young girl who blazed her own trail in the male-dominated sport of flat track racing starting from just 5 years old at Wisconsin's Aztalan Cycle Club, or better known as Azzy for short, and making her way all the way to the pro circuit on her dream bike, a Harley-Davidson XR-750. In Angels of Dirt, Wendy also sheds light on the history of flat track racing, sits down with some of the legends of the sport, and shows us that there's more to flat track racing than going around in a circle as fast as you can. There's a community of riders who live for the sport and become like family through some of life's highest highs and lowest lows. This is Wendy Schneider. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Wendy Schneider, you are on Driven to Ride. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. You've created a great film. I don't want to speak for you too much, so I'll turn it over to you first. What do people most know you for, or in your own words, what's kind of your claim to fame?
Well, I've been living in Madison for 35 years, and I guess the first half of my time here was as a musician.
Okay.
So I was in a rock band, a 3-piece rock band. People know me from that band, which was called Bugatti Type 35. And then I opened a recording studio and recorded numerous bands in the Midwest for almost 20 years. So a lot of people know me as a producer or an audio engineer that had a pretty cool recording studio before I moved into or segued into making documentary films. And now people know me for both, I think. More for the films, because that's really been my life since 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So definitely a creative, no matter what medium.
Yes, a worker. I'm just a worker.
I feel you.
Yes.
But you're also a motorcyclist.
Yeah, I'm a motorcyclist. Yeah, not this season as much as I'd like, but I do have a street bike that I really enjoy riding, for sure. Nice.
How did you get started in motorcycling, just to go from there?
You know, my first motorcycle was a Honda, I think it was a Super Sport. I got it in the 80s when I was in high school, I think from my boyfriend at the time. And then laid low while I was living in New York City. I did not have a motorcycle, but that was the first thing I did when I moved out here in Madison was I tracked down a bike. I think it was a Honda 550. Like a vintage 550, and I used that for a while. I didn't like it as much as the smaller 400. And and then after I got in a car accident, I went to a motorcycle as my primary means for getting around town, and I bought a KZ 400 from my friend Wes Orloff. I think it was his dad's in Milwaukee. So that's what I have now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I mean, obviously you've been a motorcyclist for a while, and you still love it because you created a film that has quite a lot to do about with motorcycling.
Yeah, I did. I created a film about motorcycle racing and young girls and women who race. Interestingly, I don't feel like spirit-wise it's really tied to my love of motorcycle riding. You know, motorcycle racing is just cool. I mean, I think anyone can just, depending on what you gravitate towards. But I started watching flat track racing and motocross racing at a town about 20 miles east of Madison, where there was amateur racing going on. And I don't know if I fell in love with it as much as I really enjoyed myself going to those 2 schools of racing. And that's how it all started.
Nice. Can you give us just a brief synopsis of the film and what it's called? I haven't even introduced the film yet.
I can introduce it.
Yeah, please do.
I started working on this project, which I called Angels of Dirt in 2006. And it came out of going to the races at Aztalan, which was the track 20 miles from Madison. It's a District 16 amateur racetrack. I was really turned on by the young kids that I saw racing, particularly the young girls that I saw racing. At the time, I had a camera that was on loan to me, so I decided to show up and start filming young girls, some teenagers, essentially just curious about how they approached racing, what they thought about racing, how they got into racing. And the first young person that I met was a 9-year-old girl named Charlotte Kainz. And I met Charlotte at the referral of another friend of mine, Dave Kilkenny, because he knew that I was going out to Aztalan.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you got to find and talk to Charlotte Kainz. So that began, on their stops and starts with independent projects, right? We all know
Sure.
that. But that began 17 years of my life, working on the film, then stopping for a while to work on another film, going back into it, the storyline changing. It was a journey that brought me to completion in 2024 when I premiered the film at the Wisconsin Film Festival. So that's the short of it, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great film. It is kind of surprising, especially for maybe people that aren't as involved in the motorcycle world, that there are that these amateur tracks are just kind of tucked away, outside of town, and then also that like they're family affairs, and that kids as young as like 4 or 5 years old are on these tracks and racing or riding and racing motorcycles.
Yeah. I mean, Charlotte I didn't see her race a 50cc, but at 5 years old, she was racing a 50cc. And, they go around the track.
Yeah.
They're not like ball busting machines, but, and all the kids are wearing a significant amount of gear, the right gear, the appropriate gear. I mean, these are sanctioned events by the American Motorcycle Association. So they're not, rogue races. These are organized races that fall under the criteria of amateur rules and regulations. And everybody that I've ever seen race is aware of that and buys into that and races accordingly. So there's a real nice code of conduct. When you go to amateur races, I feel like with flat track, similar to motocross, but I think I spent more of my lifestyle time with the flat track community. What I noticed out of the gate was a real respect for sort of the rules and regulations. And I think that gave me a nice foundation for the sport and for the people who were competing over, almost every weekend.
Yeah, because I mean, these like I said, it's kind of a family affair. These are just people mostly with day jobs, or maybe they work at a motorcycle shop or something like that, and they're just racing kind of for the fun of it all weekend, and then bringing their families, and then becomes this kind of one giant family.
Yeah, and I think there's for the fun of it, but there's also it's competition. The district you're getting points for your races. It's not like a track day where everyone is just kind of having fun and doing what have you. These are organized, registered events that go into a computer system. And at the end of the season, somebody wins a trophy. Well, there's a lot of trophies that are won at every match. At every race, there's always trophies. There's a lot of incentivizing to achieve, and I like that. I think the kids like that. I thought that it was a really beautiful backdrop for just learning life skills. Respecting other people and helping other people. There's a lot of like reciprocal energy at a flat track event where people really do care about the experience that their neighbor is having. And I appreciated that. And I hope that is reflected in the vibe of the film, because that's how it felt to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very intimate kind of feeling film. It's almost like getting invited to somebody's house and in the living room. And then I think it was your friend Dave Kilkenny that was like, hey man, as long as you're not a dick, you'll be like family. And I'm like,
that was Scott Johnson, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that you essentially got it. Like, if you're not a dick, you're welcome. And you pick up on that.
Yeah.
Or that's just the kind of people that are attracted to the sport. It is, as I've, done screenings, I've noticed it that much more, because some of the screenings are at racetracks, but even when I brought the film to Europe and played it for other racers, it's the same vibe. Flat track is with, look, and I don't, I'm not in the pits at MotoGP. I'm not in the pits at road racing. I'm not really like, immersed in a lot of different circles, but I feel that wherever I've gone internationally, flat track has a real strong sense of giving a shit about the other person that is you're aware of, and that feels really good to be around.
Yeah, and I think part of that respect comes from the fact that these guys and gals are racing within inches of one another on the track, right? I mean, it's pretty wild to see. So real quick though, before it's just in case anybody has never seen or experienced a flat track race, can you kind of give us like a quick primer about like what constitutes a flat track race and what makes it different maybe than like motocross, supercross, road racing, anything like that?
And this is, again, I just want to say that I'm a filmmaker. I am not a
flat track racer,
flat track historian, but I've been around it for a while. You know, flat track is one of the oldest motorcycle racing styles in the U.S. It is traditionally done on an oval racetrack that is made of dirt. The tracks can vary in size from a short track, which could be less than a quarter of a mile, to a full mile, which is sort of that is the pinnacle of professional flat track racing, is the mile tracks that you find usually at a county fairground. There are grandstands. It looks like where they have horse racing, you know?
Sure.
And, you know, there are different sizes. There is different terrain. They happen in different parts of the country. So flat track, unlike, let's say, hockey, if you were to play hockey and just go round and round in circles, it's always going to be on ice that's frozen. There's going to be some like sort of underlying similarities of every single event.
Yeah, there's a regulation size rink.
You know, on flat track, the tracks are different. The locations are around the country, so the climate is very different. It's a weather-dependent sport. You don't race if it's raining. You race at night only if there are lights. So there are some night races, day races. You know, flat track seasons constitute numerous changes in bike setup from week to week, because you might be in Florida and then Missouri and then Michigan, you know, Wisconsin, California, and all these different climates dictate bike setups. And also not only the climates, but just the length of the track, you know. But essentially, with a couple of caveats, it is oval track racing on dirt or on the earth.
Okay.
Sometimes done indoors and sometimes done on the ice. So there's other components, but
there is a shot in the film of some ice riding, and I was like,
yes.
Oh, I mean, Minnesota too, probably, but like my first thought was like, yeah, that's totally Wisconsin.
It's Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned not being a flat track historian. However, You touched on the history of flat track racing a little bit in the film, but you also interviewed some like flat track legends. Can you tell me who you were able to talk to about flat track racing and even how you got connected with them?
Yeah, you know, I would say the most notable that was a reach out of mine personally was Mert Lawwell, who is, you know, a very well-known icon in the flat track world, not only for his time spent racing with Harley-Davidson as a factory rider, as a factory racer, but also he was one of the three main characters in the iconic documentary On Any Sunday by Bruce Brown. So, yeah, and he represented the flat track, you know, individual that sort of was a gateway into the sport of On Any Sunday. And I just called him. I found a number online and I asked if he would let me interview him for the film. And I was going out to California to do some other interviews. He said, sure. I went to his house. I met his wife. We sat down and he gave me the time. It was absolutely precious. And, you know, as a documentary filmmaker doing a project that's independent, when you get someone like Mert Lawwell in your film, he becomes an anchor. You know, there are many women who are noted or nodded to in the film, but none as recognizable as Mert Lawwell. And so although this is a film about women in racing, to have this underbelly of legends who are supporting the story, it really sort of broke through to more of an audience because the film was not just going to focus on women being interviewed. The other three, Jay Springsteen, Bubba Schobert, and Scott Parker, were all friends of another gentleman in the film, Jerry Kennedy. And he was instrumental in helping me finish the film. And part of that was at a fundraiser that I was having, he essentially called his friends up, who I didn't know at the time, and said, hey, come out to Milwaukee and be in this woman's film.
Nice.
And at the time, truth be told, I was not paying attention to legends like that. I only learned the intensity of their, how they represent the sport, because as people heard that they were in the film, it was a really big deal. And they were gracious and lovely and generous with their time. And again, I love that their involvement in Angels of Dirt gives a nod to that whole arena of legends in the sport. I just loved it.
Yeah, it is a great addition, and I think it kind of gives some context, because they speak very highly of some women racers of the past. So
yeah,
you do a really good job of weaving the story of kind of a little bit of the history of flat track racing and the history of women just racing and riding motorcycles in general, which goes back, I believe it was all the way to the 30s, I think, or 40s.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have to defer to
Sure.
Wikipedia for certain things, because my passion was really about people. My passion was about community and what I saw and what I experienced, and it was lovely that it was tied into this like colorful, magical history of sporting in the U.S. Right? I really love that. I found it difficult to find a lot of information on some women. It's difficult to find footage of women racing flat track motorcycles, largely because, most of the people that are paid attention to are the ones right in front. So if somebody is winning, and then, you have Tammy Jo Kirk, who's in the film, Jen Pankey's in the film, Diane Cox is in the film. These are women that, legendary women who are recognized for, significant events. And so they become, that's why they're in the Hall of Fame. And that's great that they're in the film. A lot of women don't, they might not be at the top of the pack. That doesn't mean that they might not have 10 years of a career racing. It's interesting like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, just because they didn't necessarily win or weren't at the front, like you mentioned, doesn't discount their achievements and their, especially in their efforts and work ethic on top of that, or even just that kind of X factor of being able to read a track and be a good racer and stuff. Which probably what I imagine drew you to Charlotte and her being central to the story of the film.
Yeah, I think Charlotte was. You could just see this dedication of a young person. I think that when any of us see that in anyone, it sparks intrigue. It really, you wonder, like, it's a little, it doesn't really make her different, but it makes her different. She stood out as, somebody whose dedication you were very aware of. You saw the support of her family. I was spending a lot of time with them for a number of years, so I knew how hard she worked. Every weekend, there was something having to do with racing. If she wasn't racing, she was, searching out sponsors to help her race for the season. She was working on her promotional materials. She, in third grade, wrote a book, about racing flat track. This is somebody who at a very early age was really carving out her destiny. She was paving her way, and she was quiet about it. And she was funny, and she was sarcastic, and she was a bit of a trickster, but she was really somebody that not only myself as a filmmaker was intrigued by, but all of us who were friends with her over the years, were loved watching her become who she became. It's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, it seems like the whole track, the club, I can't pronounce it. I think it's Aztalan. Aztalan. There we go. Yeah.
You can say Azzy, and people say Azzy. Yeah,
I'll say Azzy. Yeah, no. First, I want to go there and see it now because I've seen it in the film or whatever, and check it out. But it seemed like that whole the whole community at Azzy was like rallying around Charlotte throughout her career as well. Like they were so proud. Everybody. It was very like indicative of the flat track community as a whole. It seemed like. Yeah,
and that's what she wasn't lifted up and put on people's shoulders and toted around. People were just paying attention and noticing, not only that she was, hardworking and learning from her dad initially, and then from other racers, who would influence, where
Hmm.
she was at, but watching her emerge as a contender, as somebody who at a very young age said, I want to race an XR-750. I want to race it at the Springfield Mile, and I want to win. She had that destination set at a very young age. And what I loved about Charlotte was she was her compass. Nobody was pointing her in that direction. She was saying, look, I'm pointing this way, and this is how I need to go,
Hmm.
So it was again, I said magical before, but there's something that's really special about it. And you can say special and I can still mean magical.
Sure. Yeah.
It was, I loved being around it, but it also was not an environment that was like absorbed 100% with motorcycle racing. There was life in addition to that. There was friendship. There was going to Red Lobster. There was playing miniature golf. There was,
Hmm.
there was a life, but the focus and the love and the passion was really flat track for Charlotte.
Yeah. And you have to imagine that there's something special, or like you said, something magical, or something just different. When you see this young girl, like a preteen, going
Yeah.
faster than these adult men, and they're not like in the film. They said, we weren't trying to let her win. Like, she was going faster than us and just had no fear, and was just,
Yeah.
and just casually like going past these grown adult men. That's impressive, to say the least.
That was really impressive, and I think that was a light. So sort of everyone sort of lit up when they experienced that or witnessed it. So, right, you were either on the track with her or you were watching what she was doing on the track. Either way, it was a lot of fun. I mean, there were a lot of young girls at the time that were really interesting to watch, of course. Sure. But when you make a film and you start to focus on story, and as a filmmaker, I had to gauge my comfort zone. Like, where do I fit with this community, and who am I going to be able to have the relationship with to tell a good story? And that wasn't only Charlotte, but that was talking to people about Charlotte. That felt
Sure.
like also this other, layer of excitement. People love talking about her style, her dedication, who she is, what they did with her a week ago. It's really, it's super fun.
Yeah, you were able to talk to some of her friends that were the same age or whatever, and it seemed like a lot of those young girls also looked up to her and just enjoyed her as a friend as well.
Yeah. Charlotte was good people. That's it. That's as simple as I can get with it. She was good people and didn't mess around, in that regard. She was also, I think, her sweetness and her quiet nature. She was not a wallflower, and she wasn't a passive person. She was a force. She was a unbelievable motorcycle racer. And that, I think that when I'm making the film, that pairing of this, young person on this monstrous motorcycle that is a quintessential race bike for Harley-Davidson, the XR-750, watching that pairing magnify the outcome, right? Her
Sure.
on that bike meant something bigger than both of them. And that, again, was really special to be around. And so why not celebrate it? And I think, as I look at, where the film's going now, and, other racers that I start to see that spark in, that especially young amateur female racers, I think that's what I look for, because I'm a woman who makes films.
Sure.
So I think that the story of young women in motorcycle racing, particularly with Angels of Dirt, I don't think that it ends with the end of the film. I think I am definitely interested in who's racing now, or what's happening, in the scene or in the sport, and how can the themes in Angels of Dirt begin to write a next chapter with women in sport.
Yeah. Well, like you said, 17 years of your life to work on this. and have the story twist and turn and change and all that. And it's finally been out. What's it been like for you to kind of have this story and this film finished? And what's the response been like?
The response has been 100% of the time, as far as I know, because I think when people are going to talk to me, they're probably going to say that they enjoyed the film, not that they didn't enjoy the film. But I think I've done maybe 35 or so screenings. I have another one coming up in Appleton soon, another one in Pittsburgh. The screenings are really where it feels like you're still in the community. Most of the time I made a point of bringing the film to racetracks and to racers. That's what I did in Europe. That's what I've done in the US. It hasn't had what would be considered a traditional theatrical release where you just do pop-ups in like small theaters for the general public. Because I'm just one person with no marketing budget, it was a lot of word of mouth and getting people, to come to these screenings. It's been, fantastic. I think it's there's a lot of powerful, emotional content in the film. Love and loss and dedication and transcendence. I mean, all those things speak to people in the community. So to answer your question, the response has been really good, and it feels good to share the film like that. And then about 3 weeks ago, the film went up on a platform where anybody can watch it now digitally. And that's been a really nice launch, much harder to market because events seem to be where people enjoy seeing the film. Seeing it at home, you kind of have to call everybody individually and say, like, hey, the film's available. It's also on a not very well-known platform called Eventive. Okay. And so right now, I don't know, when it will go up on Amazon or Hulu or Netflix. That takes sales representation, and I don't have that yet, So, fingers crossed it'll be everywhere at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think it's got to be validating to have gotten some recognition from film screenings. Yes, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the recognition. Just going back to the first screening, which was over 600 people in Madison, and we won the Audience Choice Award for the entire film festival. Awards like that, a turnout like that. First of all, it doesn't come easy. I had to work very hard. I'm on the radio. I'm telling people to come. This is the big premiere of the film. But the outcome of that was such a feeling of satisfaction because people had heard about the film in Wisconsin for a long time, because 17 years to be exact. But, to have a successful screening, and that one in Wisconsin, I would say 20% of the audience was motorcycle people, if that.
Oh, really?
It was mostly just regular people. And to have that kind of a reaction was absolute bliss. I was so happy that, people not only learn about who Charlotte is and some of the other women and men in flat track racing, but they're learning about a sport that is so niche. It's like the niche of the niche of motorcycle sports. So, and that has been an uphill battle. And I think that will continue to be. It's, people really a lot of people don't know what flat track racing is. They don't, everyone who I usually talk to about the film usually is asking me to break down what flat track racing is. You don't do that with motocross. People kind of know what motocross is. Motocross, supercross, endurocross. So it's been interesting in that regard because I am a filmmaker who has been in this community now for almost 2 decades. And I feel like I can do a good conservative version of representing the community because that's where I kind of live. That's where my work is right now. But I did a podcast with a friend of mine who's an AMA announcer, a professional announcer.
Oh, so sure, yeah.
I would talk about the film and Scotty Dubler would talk about the sport. And it was a beautiful compliment to the film and the community because Scotty was a racer. His dad was a racer. He's a third generation
Oh, wow.
racer.
Okay, yeah.
And he lives flat track. And I found that to be the most interesting way to complement what is the sport and what is this movie.
Even just hearing some of the stats of 140 miles an hour and then you go into a turn. I mean, It's insane to think about, right?
It's
Insane.
yeah, it's really it's an unfathomable experience, and it doesn't, and I think I used to say that racers were fearless, but I think
Hmm.
that if racers, they're not fearless as much as they are ready. Like, these racers are ready to do what they do. It's not about not having fear. It's about having ability and having the training behind you. That's what this is about. And I found that just absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember who said it in the film, but somebody said, "I'm just as comfortable taking a left turn at 140 miles an hour that I am sitting in this chair." And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that was Mert Lawwell.
"Oh, that was Mert." Okay, yeah. I was just like, I don't. I get.
Yeah.
We've interviewed a couple of racers and stuff, and it's on the track. They seem like superhuman, or they're not from this earth, or whatever. And but then you sit down with them, and they're just regular people with just
Yeah.
extraordinary abilities.
Yeah.
It's just what
Yeah.
they do. So.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
So over that 17 years, working on the film and everything, did you notice kind of how either the motorcycle industry or the world, motorcycle world, or like flat track racing kind of world changed over that time?
That's a good question, because what didn't change
Hmm.
for me personally was local races, amateur races. Same kind of vibe, very DIY, very, you're adhering to the AMA rules and regulations, but it's families and kids and learning. It's, like learning the ins and outs of the sport. Some of these kids want to go pro, some of them are just weekend riders. That has always been the case. On the
Hmm.
professional level, I'd have to take a step back and really look at, over 20 years, what has happened to professional flat track. And that is where, somebody like a Scotty Dubler, who's the voice of flat track, he can measure that year to year with what's changing and why. I think that
Sure.
the sport goes through iterations of itself depending on who's running the sport, how the sport is doing financially. Rules change. The ins and outs tend to be a little bit fluid depending on, just what's happening with the
Sure.
energy of professional sports. It's hard to comment on because it overwhelmed me to keep up. And I
Sure.
felt like, well, that's not the story of Angels of Dirt. Angels of Dirt is the story of life of Charlotte Kainz, and then a sort of low-hanging fruit example of who all is around this sport and why is it what it is. You could make, four more documentaries that spawn off of the one I made, just looking at, let's say, Mert Lawwell. Let's just do his film now.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many, rich stories and lives that are part of this community. I feel fortunate that I'm telling Charlotte's story in a way where she is introduced to people, and at the end of the film, they do feel like they know her, and that's really special.
Yeah. That kind of leads me to this question. What do you, is that kind of what you want people to take away from Angels of Dirt, or what do you want people to walk away with at the end of the film?
I think that every time I watch the film, there is just a real strong sense of community relationships and dedication and love for sport that is just part of the fabric of this story. And I think that that's something that matters to people. I think, that audiences like feeling the kind of love energy, in the film without being a
Yeah.
hippie about it. It's it's a sweet story about a group of people. And I think that, if Charlotte was a softball player, it might still play out to be a similar story because of all the people and how those people relate to each other, help each other, care about each other, and also how they fit into the context of the history of a sport over the course of, in my film, 50 years.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit more than 50 years. I don't go way back into the origins. That just felt like too much work. I had my work cut out for me in other areas, but I think that, I want people to understand a feeling of transcendence, that you going through life, there are intensities beyond measure. And I think that Angels of Dirt takes you through some of those intensities, and you come out the other end and you still have, people that inspire you, and a sport that connects to your heart and your life. And, there's, it's kind of mushy. That's like the mushy
Yeah, a
button
little.
for me. But
Not in a bad way. Yeah.
I love that. It's, I did my best as a storyteller to let people represent, this one person, but I also wanted to shine a light on all these other areas so that they might be a gateway for other people to learn about the community.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, like I said, you kind of invited us into the front room, as it were, of flat track and Azzy and these people that love the sport, and that's the through line, really, through like, love and loss and ups and downs and highs and lows. I mean, all of which are in the film. I mean, you really take us for a ride.
Thank you.
And but it is that constant theme of the track being there and the people being there and always having a smile on, and being together. You mentioned you had the that screening in Madison. Obviously you've lived in the Wisconsin area or in Wisconsin for a while. It's the birthplace of Harley-Davidson. Do you think that like Wisconsin is like a special place for motorcycling and motorcyclists? It seems like there's, I don't know if it's something in the water or maybe at the birth of Harley. But that's just something to me, there seems to be something special about motorcycling in Wisconsin.
I mean, I could say that, but I'm biased, because
Sure.
Most of the racers and riders and mechanics and engineers, a lot of those people I know through the making of Angels of Dirt. I think that, the vibe in Wisconsin, it's a cool one, but I wouldn't say that it compares or measures in any way against any other territory. That's, but if you asked racers, they might have a different opinion,
Yeah.
I think that what I get away with in working on the life of this film as it goes out is really to say, look, I'm just a filmmaker. So I don't really have to, attach certain opinions that maybe a racer might attach. But, from where I sit, all the people that I've met through the screenings of this film, and they've been in tons of states and now, in Europe, they've been so lovely and so endearing and really motivated about this story and how it connects to their lives. So, yeah, I'm not the one to ask.
Fair enough. Well, I think there's something special, like I said, or something in the water or something up there. But real quick, taking it over to Europe, in some ways, I think it's a uniquely American story, but I think obviously in many other ways, it's a universal story. So do people in Europe get it right away, or does it take a little time to connect throughout as the film goes on?
I think that people in Europe get it right away because flat track is growing in Europe significantly.
Oh, okay.
What happens in every screening, and I've screened it 8 or 9 times in Europe now. It's Germany, Netherlands, Portugal, and the UK a number of times. I might be forgetting one place, but in every single screening, there was this invigoration for what they're doing there. There are flat track groups and clubs and races and tracks, and they love it. They're excited about it. It is an interesting time to look at flat track in Europe because it's emerging in the way that maybe like rockabilly started emerging in Europe because they saw like American rock and roll, like Bo Diddley and folks like that, Chuck Berry. But so it was amazing. The Lisbon Motorcycle Film Festival, and this is in Portugal, they reached out to me and said, we want to fly you over and have you be our opening night film.
Wow. So
that was a big deal. It was over 400 people, I think, watched the film in Portugal. I had to have it subtitled, for that.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful, and it's exciting to see where the film has come since its first screening, April of 2024. Now it's online, but I'm still doing a handful of screenings. So it's who knows what's going to happen, as it keeps going. There's also, I'm doing like a storybook version of the film. So there will be like another way to digest the movie in a storybook, which is almost like verbatim what's said in the film, but, presented in a storybook with lots of pictures and stuff. So yeah, I'm big on derivative work, right? So I've got the story, and how can we get more of the story out there in different ways so that people eventually find their way back to the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. The more that channels you can use to share the story, the better. So
yes, yeah.
Well, very cool. I mean, so is anything else that you want to talk about with Angels of Dirt? Again, it's a great film. I want to give you another opportunity to let everybody know where you can find it, where you can watch it, and why they shouldn't sleep on it.
Please go and watch the film. You can go to the website, which is angelsofdirt.com, and it says click here to watch. The pricing is pretty affordable. It's kind of a pay what you can now. I just updated the pricing. So I hope that if anyone is prohibitive from watching the film, email me and I'll make sure that you can watch the film. It's a beautiful story. It's a story and a film and a project that definitely needs an audience. So I think that I would encourage listeners to watch it. They can email me and let me know what they liked about the film. They can share it. This project is 100% grassroots. There's no representation. So I'm doing this the old-fashioned way, podcasts and door knocking.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a story that resonates with people who have nothing to do with motorcycle racing. That's what I've learned. And that's been a beautiful lesson with putting the story out there. So I hope that people watch it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And, one last thing I'll say is that the film feels authentic, like it authentically produced, authentically, like you're right there in it, just as a lens into this world without just as it is, without any kind of commentary or really anything like that, and letting people tell their stories. So
thank you.
I appreciated the authenticity of it. So Wendy, thank you so much for being here. Again, check it out, angelsofdirt.com, and excited to help share the story. So thanks. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts too. If you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure, email us hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.